We're going to speak with Nathan Carlin, who is an academic in Texas in medical humanities. And it's the first time that I will ever be interviewed by someone who called me up and really wanted to get to know me and my work to place it in the pantheon of American writers. And he was really surprised that nobody's really written about any of this stuff. And so he explains, why they didn't and why he does. It's a wonderful, wonderful time to be speaking with him.
Welcome to Conversations with Shem. Our focus is to show how to put the human back into healthcare.
Welcome to another episode in our fabulous show. With us, we have, as we always do, Dr. Samuel Shem, who's the author of The House of God and Man's Fourth Best Hospital, and also a professor of medicine and medical humanities at the NYU Grossman Medical School. And sitting across from him virtually on this episode will be Dr. Nathan Carlin, who is a professor at the McGovern Center for Humanities and Ethics at McGovern Medical School. So welcome to you both.
Well, this is a great pleasure for me to have my newest, bestest friend, a remarkable young man who is a humanist and also knows all about ethics. And I'm not sure exactly how we met. I think you wrote me, or yes, you wrote me to ask if I would write an introduction to some book you were reading, and then we got to be more close and friends. And this is, if you can believe it, the first time in my almost 50 years of being a writer that I'm on a video, a podcast, with someone whose work is to understand fiction and nonfiction, understand writing, especially in the humanities. And it's the first time that I'm ever talking to somebody like that. And most of them are either scared of me or I'm scared of them. But as you write in this chapter from a book that you're about to that you will publish at the Oxford University Press, you were kind of surprised that because I'm one of the most noted doctor writers, that I almost never have been written about by anyone in the academic humanities system. So I am very pleased that you can say some things about my work. And I guess the only question I well, why don't you say a little bit about how we got to be co-workers and basically and friends, and then what surprised you about what I was doing, and then I am after that, you got me even more than I got myself as I wrote my books. I understood more clearly what I was doing, why I was writing, what I was writing, um, the ethical and moral progression of it. So those are things I'd like to hear. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Dana, for having me on this episode. I would say about, the surprising nature of it all. I think a couple of things really surprised me about you right from the get-go. So it was Tony McSannick who suggested that I write to you. He edits the NYU Medical Humanities database. And I was really surprised right off the bat that you wrote me back. I mean, almost immediately. I mean, I didn't really expect you to write me back at all, And so that surprised me. And then you said, kind of some version of what you just said previously, basically that folks in medical humanities and the academy sort of in general really haven't paid much attention to your work. And that really surprised me right off the get-go, because I had just assumed that a lot had been sort of written about you, because The House of God, of course, is the most well-known book in medical humanities. You asked me to come on to watch that Oxford Rhodes Scholar thing that you did a month ago or so. And I think when you were being introduced there was some survey that was being cited that doctors list The House of God as the most influential book in their lives, and then the Bible was like number 3 or something like that. And so that's what I mean, of that someone of your stature that everybody has read and knows about. I had assumed that that there was a lot sort of kind of written about you. And then when you made that comment, I went back and looked, and I said, well, gee, he really is right. There was this early article by Catherine Montgomery Hunter that was important in sort of laying down the very basics of putting you in context of literature and medicine. And then more recently, Delise Weir's article, which I thought is really well done. I think that she really sort of helps sort of readers understand satire.
Who that?
Delise Weir.
Oh yeah, right.
And her article on you on satire, which I think is really good. And but other than that, everything that's out there about you is usually sort of interviews that people do with you, or there are these one-page commentaries and medical journals and so forth that I found very helpful to read, but they're not all that substantive. And I think that was kind of your point. And so it was yeah. So I would say that was the main thing, is just being really surprised at how at first approachable you are and receptive you are, and then the fact that your writings haven't been taken as seriously as they should have been, sort of all this time.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I got the label of writing a sexy, funny book, and here it is almost 50 years later, and it's the most important medical novel in the world. How did that happen?
I mean, I think and this is why Delise's article is good, is that I think that people just really misunderstood you on satire. And whenever and honestly, I hadn't read The House of God until we started corresponding. I didn't, I had it on my bookshelf for about 10 years. But I just hadn't gotten around to reading it. I figured everybody else has read it and has done stuff on it, and eventually I would get to it. But then we started corresponding and talking on the phone, and I thought, well, boy, I got to read this, And
I'll do anything to sell a book,
Yeah. So I read it, and I told you this, and it's interesting. The first time you read sort of a book and you don't know what's sort of coming, the House of God makes you very uncomfortable, for the first half or three quarters of the book. And I had really ambivalent feelings about you at first. It's sort of like, what is he saying? What does he really think? Does he really think old people are Gomers? And you know what I mean? And it was sort of like, it's just uncomfortable. And then for me, the thing that once I understood, well, two things in the novel itself, about halfway or three quarters of the way through, sort of Roy is sort of exposed as a flawed figure. So it's just not like, this is you and this is perfect and Roy's right about everything or something, something like that. That Roy is someone with obvious limitations and that's okay. Then I began to understand the satire. And then in sort of after reading all of these interviews with you and talking with you, of thinking, no, this is really a progressive guy from the 60s who sort of likes change, wants to make change. And so I knew you had a good base of sort of progressive moral values. And so between reading the interviews, talking with you, seeing the change in the novel, I began to sort of trust you as a writer. Does that make sense? And so I think a lot of people don't put in enough time to think about, like, maybe they just get offended or something like that. And then the doctors who read it, like you said, just, basically all doctors read it, but they're so busy that they don't have time to sort of analyze it, I think. So that may be another contributing factor to why it hasn't got sufficient attention. Doctors have read it, but they don't have time to read about or write about it,
Yeah. In this chapter, I was just really astonished at your sort of central thesis and about my work, which is absolutely bang on. And I think I gave you that Chekhov quote that's in Fiction as Resistance. And why don't you describe how you looked at me when you were writing about me? Because it was it certainly fit, but what you were saying is how rare it is in any novel. But I mean, there are novels that do this, but certainly not in medical novels. Can you do that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it was, after, reading all your books and getting to sort of to know you better, I understood that there's this, activist core sort of part of your being. And so it made sense to me that had to be sort of all of sort of what you're doing sort of in your writing. And you have that essay, Fiction as Resistance. And so I'm working on this sort of larger project. I won't get into all the details about it, but it's basically about secularization in medicine. And like the idea there is that there's certain sort of similarities between religion and medicine. Clergy wear black robes, doctors wear white coats, clergy give out the sacraments, doctors write prescriptions. The operating room could be seen as the Holy of Holies, things like that. There's these basic sort of congruencies between medicine and religion that I think can be viewed as a secularizing sort of process. And I fit you into that larger thesis in terms of prophecy. And so the idea is that physician writers are the prophets of our time, the secular prophets of our time. And so when I use the word secular, I don't mean it to sort of denigrate religion. It's sort of, I'm using it as a term of transposition or sort of migration. And for your work in general, I remembered a passage from the Hebrew Bible, Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of us but to act justly, to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God. That's a passage that's just loved by progressives and activists. And so I started looking at your work, and it seemed like that the house of God definitely fit the mercy bit. This is really a plea for mercy for interns. Interns are just abused, especially when you wrote the novel. And I don't think people fully appreciate how hard residency is today. I mean, I think the statistics are, a physician commits suicide every single day in the United States, and I don't know how many of them are residents. But I saw it as basically, so mercy fitting the house of God, and then in your psychiatry residency book, Mount Misery, I saw that as humility and justice, fitting those themes of the novel. And then for your most recent book in that kind of trilogy, Man's Fourth Best Hospital, I saw that as sort of a departure from your Jewish roots and more about your Buddhist spirituality and the great impact of relational theory and feminism has had sort of on your personal life, that those core parts of your being, because the Fat Man is so into relational theory and Man's Fourth Best Hospital. So I just saw these major pieces of religion and spirituality. I think you would prefer the word spiritual more than religion.
Yeah, that just blew me away. And the part that really I felt got me was a sort of, you talk about it as prophecy sometimes, or prophecy. And the thing that I realized from your writing that chapter especially was that it's not enough for me just to write a book, right? Or even in the book, just to describe. Most medical novelists and nonfiction people, of course, in medicine, they describe accurately what the story is there, right? But that that gets me bored. If I have to write nonfiction, I die. I feel like, oh, they're hemming me in. I gotta go. And I really think, I think you said it. I mean, I'm kind of singular, and I think this is why the House of God, and I hope the others like Man's Fourth Best Hospital follow. They seem to be. Is that it's not just how things are; it's how they move, right? It's like I mentioned to you the Wallace Stevens poem. The blue guitar, he says things played on the blue guitar are changed by the blue guitar, right? And so there's this, hey, wait a second, and everything I'm writing, not consciously, but it's like, hey, what's wrong here? Where can we possibly go on this? It's what is, but what could be. And a few poets and very few novelists, not in medicine at all. I can't think of one at all who had done this. But there are some who are my favorite writers, of course, like Orwell, or even Tony, what's her name? Blocking on Tony, Tony won the Nobel Prize in America. And a few others, in fact, not in medicine, do that. And I'm in that club, and but it really goes back to, it's an old tradition in really great books. Tolstoy, people think, oh, he's just doing these great panoramas of people. No, everything he writes is wanting to show how it's better. It can be better. And what can I say? And there's a lot to write about that way. He's a favorite one. Even Chekhov, he even has a quote, that you wouldn't think of Chekhov, oh, he's just writing the way life is. No, he says the great writers have to have something that you see how it could be better. And I think he says, and you're infatuated by it, that the reason he's so good is he constantly is saying, to Moscow, to Moscow. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, and in Man's Fourth Best Hospital, I mean, what I really like about that book, so much of that book is about technology and the problem of the electronic health record and how billing is attached to that. And it really is a core issue of our time sort of right now. And physicians go home at night and they're still entering in codes and filling up charts, and they're getting burned out. And it's interesting, all the conversations that I ever hear about it in terms of the solutions, people always say, well, if we can just get a physician in to help design the electronic health record on the front end, then it'll work, and then it'll be good, and then it'll be better. But what your novel sort of exposes is that that's the wrong way of thinking about it. It's not about making a better system. It's about taking the money out of it. As you put it, a new law in there about squeeze the money out of the machine, disconnect it from billing. And nobody says that, no, I've never heard anybody say that.
Well, yeah, I spent a month, looking at the American healthcare system, and the fat man in the book, as you know, says the 6 rackets of American healthcare: follow the money. And so I really went into it just as, incredibly fiercely. And it just became very clear. And as the fat man, who's who's really stands up as me, says at the end of the book, something very simple: you got to squeeze the money out of the machines, and tells how to do it and all of that stuff. And the fact, getting doctors did help in joining that machine. I mean, well, the primary problem was Obama in 2008. He wanted to create data that could be sent to other places. Great. But what happened is the private insurance industry got into the machine, and it assigned a monetary value for every piece of data. And then you have the war between insurance and poor old doctors trying to, So yeah, Tolstoy is a very apropos here. He says the new slavery is money. The new slavery is money.
And the other thing, sort of following that same principle, like you're saying, writing to change the world, like the world can be better, the world can be different.
Right.
In Man's Fourth Best Hospital, another sort of thing I really appreciate about the book is its sort of beginning and ending sort of with Costa Rica, and then the accident in Costa Rica, and the good care and the free care that Roy gets there. So I think what that does is it shows, provides a cultural angle that, in other places it really is different, and it could be different here too.
Yeah.
I lived in Scotland for a year, and so I have a lot of friends there, and I was pretty interested in the National Health Service there, and the American critique of it always is, well, you got to wait a long time and this and that, and that that's fair. Sometimes that happens for non-serious issues, but I went back and visited a friend there, and they found a tumor on her spine, and she had back surgery within 3 days, and it was all free,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a story I like to tell about, if Scotland can do that, why can't the United States?
Yeah, I think it's going to come. Before we stop, though, in this we could talk a lot, but we can't talk a lot here. Would you say something about what we both conclude is my quote best novel, The Spirit of the Place.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because nobody knows about it, and I
Yeah.
love that book too much. So what did that seem to how to just tell me something about that?
Well, the reason I like the spirit of the place so much is in that book, and people probably don't know this about you, is that you completely let go of satire. You know, there's humor in the book, but there's no satire in the spirit of the place. And this is you writing from the heart. This is just you dealing with a lot of universal sort of human yearnings and problems about, can we go home again? What about our childhood bullies? Did our mothers really love us? You
Mhm.
know, uh, it's just a profoundly moving book about family and friendship and pain and loss and finding love again. You know, I just yeah, I just really appreciated it for all those reasons. And then, as you know, I did this class on 4 of your books with medical students, and
Yeah,
they all said the same thing. They
yeah.
said Spirit of the Place was their favorite too, you know. And so I think this book should be, when word needs to get out about it.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a new agent, so maybe we'll get it more known. But how can you not like a book that starts with even a shy American can be happy in Italy?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to say about anything else? Let's see if what we didn't cover. Um, I guess, do we have any time left, Director?
You can take another 5 minutes if you want one more question. It's
Okay.
probably good.
All right.
No, I have a question for you, that or kind of a comment, and maybe you could react to it or something like that. Another thing that I really liked about Man's Fourth Best Hospital is when the fat man dies and there's the funeral, you make a point of saying that none of his high school friends came, or like nobody came, basically, other than the medical people, you know. And the reason why that sort of jumped out to me, there's this band called the Avett Brothers I've been listening to a lot lately, and there's a line in one of their songs saying, it says, I'll get the line wrong, but it's something like, "I want friends who know me for what I have become, not for who I was."
Mhm.
You know, so that to me seemed to capture both the song and that point about no friends from high school coming, something about the struggles of men and friendship sort of as they age, you know. So I don't know, I guess I'd like to hear you sort of say something about friendship, you know.
Yeah, well, friendship is even in the Buddha's teachings, he talks about how important it is to have a partner in learning the Dhamma and going on the path. And maybe I'm bringing that up not only because Janet is a teacher of all of that and is looking at friendships, friendships as in the oldest suttas that are described by the the Buddha. And I think what I treasure the most about a good friendship, I mean, somebody says to the Buddha, this friend of yours here, this is it says that friendship is half of the holy life. And the Buddha says, no, friendship is the whole of the Buddha, of the Dharma, of Buddhist life. Um, I think over my life, I've realized that, especially growing up American, especially an overachiever and all of that stuff, you don't value friendships as much as getting someplace. And the fat man is a fascinating character, as you know, didn't really exist. And he's sort of like one side of me, that I really went up from a little town, I went up to all of the honors and all that stuff and all the regular stuff. And I neglected friendship in a lot of ways. And the fat man is great when he's in a place of power over his interns or his residents or others. But when Barry asks him, do you ever get to mutual? Because he's a top-down, heavy top-down power, and he's startled. He can't quite get what Barry, Roy's wife, says at that point in Man's Fourth Best Hospital. He doesn't get that he's like the hierarchical institution in one man. And he doesn't know what mutual power is. It's as simple as that. The power doesn't arise in his connecting with others. The power in his mind is just there. So I guess those lines came to me because he was lonely. The quote, he's lonely, you're lonely at the top. That's a wonderful thing to write about there, because it's really about the deficiency of I power as opposed to relational power, where everyone is more empowered by being in relationship. You go out and you have a great luncheon, and if it works, both people come out empowered, like to do a difficult thing in medicine. And what I say now when I go out to talk, this is the latest, is kind of good connection is good medicine. It's as simple as that. Good connection is good medicine. That's the one phrase I've come up in my 76th year, I think.
Yeah.
But I just want to say how much I appreciate your taking an interest in my work. And I know it's a terrible burden, and you'll get shat on, but we'll have a good time.
Yeah. No, it's been so much fun and meaningful for me, both to read your work and to get know you as a person and to become friends. I think that on this theme of friendship, I think and good connection, like you're saying, I think it's basically hard for men. I don't think, especially straight men, I don't think straight men do friendship well. I don't know if maybe it's homophobia or something. I don't know, but
I think it's because, it really is because, women are never in their development said to move away from relationship to the mother. We, to be men, had to move away, not from mother. That's the old Freudian bullshit. Move away from the relationship with mother, which then generalizes to relationship as number one. And we go off on our self journeys. And if we're lucky, before we go crazy at 40, we find some good answers.
Well, I'm 41, about to be 42, so I guess I need a good psychiatrist.
And a second baby.
Yeah, and a second baby. Yeah.
When's the baby come in?
June 6th is the due date. Yeah.
Right. So. Get all this writing about me done before then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you, Shem. Always good to be with you.
Well, that was really important and refreshing to me to have someone who, who's like, even like a therapist or something. He really saw more in my work than I saw when I was writing it. He sort of explained it to me, and that was quite a comfort to hear. And he's brilliant. He's academic, and I really appreciated him coming on.